to sum it up in one word, empowerment is really important. We don't think we can have a really high powering team if there's micromanagement and people aren't empowered to make decisions. Because if they're not empowered to make decisions on a day-to-day basis, it clogs up the system. There's certain decisions you want your staff to make, and there's certain things that they can't. If that's well defined at the beginning, the empowerment really does go a long way.
Hey there, this is Leighton Healey with the Restoration Playbook Podcast. Today's episode is all about mastering operations and building operational rigor. And our guest is my friend Lory Perizzolo, one of the best in the business. He's the COO at RCCN DKI, a Canadian-based DKI location that is tearing it up right at the heart of the Canadian Rockies. He's here to walk us through the ways his organization has evolved over the years and is going to bring you some practical advice of how to bring a culture of continuous improvement to your company. So to kick things off, let's let Lory introduce himself.
Thanks for having me, Leighton. And so my career started a little bit different than, I guess everyone's career starts a little bit different than each other, but I started my career actually doing my tile setting apprenticeship in the trades years ago. Grew up in the trades. My father was a tile setter, and over time I got to meet some different people like you do. And I met a couple of people working at the insurance company side of the business in underwriting and actuarial. And I'd go for coffee with this individual and kind of learn about the industry. And he seemed really happy with his career and what he was doing. And it seemed exciting. So one day I said, tell me about the industry. Tell me about the insurance industry. And he kind of did out on a big piece of paper, and it looked like a spider web, frankly. And there were so many parts to it, whether it's claims or underwriting or supply chain, vendor network, the brokerage side of it. So I ended up registering for a night class. So I'd work during the day and I'd register for a night class in the CIP program, principles and practices, put that on a resume. And back in 98, there was no Indeed or anything. So it was pounding the pavement and dropping off resumes.
Mm-hmm.
Dropped the resume off at one of the insurance companies, got hired in a claims training group the next week. And just kind of started from the ground up. And then I was a telephone adjuster and a road adjuster. And then that kind of led to getting into the different management roles, team leadership with property adjusting teams and claims adjusting teams. And then that led into getting into a new idea at the time, supply chain and vendor management. So I started to meet some people along the way in Western Canada. That was my area, my scope. And that led eventually into doing a little bit of independent adjusting. And that led into eventually getting into a national role for vendor management for one of the national carriers. And that obviously gave me the opportunity to attend different meetings and meet some different people coast to coast. And that led me to meet a fellow named Chris Schmidt with DKI Canada. And ended up spending the next 3.5 or 4 years with the DKI Canada corporate office in the role of senior vice president or executive vice president with Chris for the operations for the corporate office. And then you fast forward to 2019, where I ended up spending a bit more time with Al Welton, the owner and majority shareholder of the Rocky Cross group of companies in Calgary. And I was hired on as the chief operating officer for the group of companies, which consists of obviously RCC North, RCC Red Deer, Calgary Contents, and Total Exteriors. And I've been here ever since. So that's kind of the Coles notes of my career from kind of 98 till 2024.
Amazing. And looking back, if someone was to tell you, when you were first going through your tile apprenticeship, you'd be at the helm of this conglomerate, what would you have said?
I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's wild, man.
I went to university for a year right after high school, and didn't mind it, but I just had this urge to go and kind of figure it out on my own, go out and start to make some money and pay bills and learn the responsibilities of life and that sort of thing. So I learned better personally just by doing and going out and figuring it out, and then taking some education and finishing my CIP designation along the way, and just kind of getting education that way. But I kind of found throughout my career, I kind of learned best from people around me and working together with different people and getting different experiences. And I kind of found that because I had some of those different experiences in my career, whether it was adjusting or team leadership or the independent adjusting part, or even a little bit of project management before I came on here, I just found that especially with the time on the insurance company side in the vendor management supply chain space. It gave me a really different lens to be able to operate in this side of the insurance industry.
Yeah, well said. There's a lot that we want to cover today, and there's a lot of questions that I want to jump into. But one of the things that I'd love to start with is, so we're talking about these 8 pillars in this part of this study we did. We're winning with workers, and we believe at Know How that the industry is not opportunity restrained; it's people restrained, and that in fact, you look at the rise of catastrophic events, you look at just even the fact that the average consumer is not that handy anymore, that there is huge opportunity for organizations, especially leading brands like yours, and if they can get the people right. And one of the pillars, when I think about your company, we titled it "Resist Operational Entropy," and it's kind of takes us back to physics class when we were all in school. And I'm not saying I did great at physics, but I remember this concept. This old French philosopher in the 1790s who talked about, when you stop giving something attention, it loses momentum, right?
Yeah.
And I think about this industry as a business that sometimes people can live in this constant reactionary mode. I'm down actually at an event for catastrophe responders. I'm in Florida today. And, I was talking to one guy and said, do you ever find you live just constantly in that fight or flight mode? Like you're just constantly running on adrenaline. And he's like, yeah, that's the game. And I think about, you and I are both from Calgary. And so there's ice in our lives. And I know you guys just raised a pile of money. Congratulations for Ronald McDonald House with a hockey tournament. And I think
it's
about
snowing today, by the way.
Oh, well, it's not here. It is piping hot. So
There you go.
we should have done this interview. I should have said, hey, we'll send the jet. So
There you go. Next time.
but next time, yeah, exactly. But in short, what I'm getting at is like someone, you see them on the ice and their skates are wobbly because they haven't tightened up their laces, um, this industry can get loose really quick if you're not exerting what we call like operational rigor. How do you think about that?
Yeah, you've explained that and summarized that quite nicely. It is really important, and one of the things that I think has really helped us since I came on board, anyways, was I spent the first little while, and you've heard the story before, but I spent the first little while, like anyone else would, coming in and just observing, getting to know the people that were here, understanding what's working, what isn't, what kind of processes were in place. So I spent the first number of weeks definitely just observing a lot and kind of learning and understanding what was really happening. And after that time, like anyone else, I understood that there had to be some change, both in personnel, some of the tools we were using, because to us, culture was to myself personally, culture is a really important piece of what we're trying to do in the market, and it helps differentiate us a little bit. And people want to work with good people, and they want to come to a place that's the right environment. So a lot of that heavy lifting was definitely done in the first couple of years, and I kind of identified it was really important to identify who the core group of people were going to be moving forward, not just from an operational standpoint in terms of the front line and the doers, but in terms of that operational management leadership team, in terms of how are we going to push things forward, because as you can appreciate, you need to have the doers, and you need to have the thinkers, kind of on both sides of the table to make sure that you're getting that buy-in. So in our case, it did take a couple of years to kind of iron through those bumps and just make sure we had the right people on the bus and the right people in the right seats that were going to kind of be able to drive that culture forward and make sure we were the right place to help us attract other people to come in and allow us to do their different things in our market. And one of those examples is making sure that we identified the right people to create different divisions and different service offerings, like our commercial and complex division, which never existed in 2019. A long history in the Calgary market doing commercial and complex projects, but over time we just didn't have the right people, and we eventually did identify the right people to build and grow a new team over the past 2 or 3 years, which kind of helped us diversify a little bit and create that different service offering that we didn't have before.
So there was clearly uh, a crossroads where you guys had to make some pretty difficult decisions around the team. So, when I think about this idea of how do you bring more rigor to a business that just naturally is always moving towards, I mean, chaos is not a bad way of saying it. Like, you're responding to chaos, and sometimes the business can get wrapped up in the chaos, right? And so let's tell us about that a little bit. Take us back in time and whatever you're comfortable sharing. But I think that the point that you were at a number of years ago is a point that a lot of companies are probably at right now. And you guys made some tough decisions, because it sounds like what you're saying is that creating this tight operational organization starts with the people who run this
100%.
organization. So what would you be willing to share? I'd love to take some time and just hear the story, and how did you know change had to happen? What did the change look like, and what's on the other side for those who are saying that sounds painful, Lory? And how would you describe what's on the other side?
Oh, it was it was painful for, like I said, the heavy lifting was legitimately heavy lifting, because what I noticed is that there were certain complacencies in certain areas. There wasn't really much rhythm or predictability to some of the information that was flowing, in terms of whether it was written or kind of meeting cadence or goal setting or documented processes and practices. So one of the things we did right away is we reestablished kind of just, it sounds really simple, but either weekly or monthly meetings with our operational team. And when I say that, I mean all the operation team, not just our project managers and their assistants, but more our production coordinators and schedulers, and our in-house estimators, and our compliance folks, and our operational leaders. And that whole group started getting together once in a while, and it was really open-ended. It wasn't, we really strategically tried to not make it a push of information to them to say, this is what we're doing. We tried to make it around the table to say what's working, what isn't. And we kept the meetings really concise and really brief, just to say what's working, what isn't working, what haven't we tried, what should we be trying, what are you hearing in the industry, what kind of tools are out there that we haven't explored yet. And we really tried to garner that feedback flow kind of coming to the management group, rather than us just pushing an idea on them. So we found that really valuable. The other thing we instituted was, again, it sounds really simple, but some of it can be hard work. It is actually documenting what your goals are for the business for the next 12 months, and doing regular follow-ups, and kind of displaying that in our case, we just put it on a simple spreadsheet. We get together once a year in a strategic planning session every year, which, you were nice enough to come out last year, so we appreciate that. And that's the time where we develop our top 4 or 5 actionable items or action plans that we want to specifically work on and meet or exceed for the next calendar year. And that's developed right in the ring. It's an 8 or 9 hour meeting. We do it as a retreat out of town. It also serves as a bit of a team building event or exercise for the team. And once we have those goals established, the last half of the meeting is typically going around the room and literally looking at those goals and saying, how do we get there? How do we develop those tactics? And we actually document. So we come back after the meeting, and myself and our business coach and management team, we sit down and we actually assign responsibilities and accountabilities for each of those tactics and each of those action plans. And we actually monitor it once a month. Whoever's responsible for those items, we'll sit down and just say, hey, how's the software development going with DRS Complete, or the integration with any number of softwares, and there's people responsible for that. Or it might be something, one of the goals might be to reduce our aged receivables. How are we going to get there? What kind of different reporting do we need on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? How are we going to action it? So we actually follow up on these things. The other thing we do that's kind of in a micro snapshot, but kind of a bigger picture. We have that annual strategic meeting, and then mid-year, we just finished them last week. We get the teams together again, and we actually put up that spreadsheet for each of the groups and say, okay, green, yellow, red. Did we achieve it? Are we approaching it? Or is it still being worked on? Did we miss the boat, or did we have to switch gears? And we realized it's not possible to work on that goal for whatever reason. And we actually put it up on the board, and we have a touch point with the group and say, look, we're holding ourselves accountable because we promised you that we would be attacking these goals that you developed and you've been helping us work on. And this kind of helps keep us accountable along with them to say, this is our progress we've made after the first 6 months. This is why we haven't been able to do it. Or we'll ask the group, why don't you think we've been able to do it? Is our tactic wrong? And do we need to switch gears on it? So it's kind of a constant feedback. And honestly, it's kind of putting our money where our mouth is to say, hey, we're sticking to our goals. Are you? And try and kind of build that kind of group accountability that way. We found it pretty successful. So that was kind of one major thing that we instituted that has paid off because it keeps us on track. And even if you're not hitting that goal, you're seeing the progress towards it, and you're seeing that some of those tactics that you put in place actually do make a difference. So it makes it tangible, really, right?
So I'm hearing a lot in that. So let me back up a bit. So I can also tell you what I'm not hearing. Like what I'm not hearing and what you're saying is I'm not hearing a white ivory tower where Lory comes down and says, here's the plan and get at it. Right. So you're clearly enrolling people from the very beginning. You pulled your team to identify what's working, what's not working. And then you've got these mechanisms in place where the key team members are contributing to the what and the how. And then there's a level of there's a feedback loop, but there's also this follow up and you're enrolling them. So I think that when people listen to advice on how to get the business going, I think that oftentimes we stop at tactics and we don't actually take time to say, how do I get my team on board with this? Right. It sounds like getting your team involved, and not just in like a kind of like a, just like a pithy way. Like it's like they're making material contributions. Can you speak further to that?
Yeah, 100%. Just before I do that though, there's a couple things that has really worked for us, and maybe it doesn't work for everyone. But when I'm looking for people to join the team, one of the things that I try to relay I think it's important that people, and a lot of candidates do ask the question, they want to know what the management style is of the person that they're reporting to. That's really important because people generally leave because of people or because of management. And so my advice would be give people the tools and resources they need to get the job done effectively. Empower them with whatever decision-making level that you're comfortable with empowering them with, and get out of the way. Let them own their successes, let them own their mistakes. And a lot of people, when they come in, they'll ask, once we do some of the onboarding with HR, the paperwork, and kind of day one meeting people and kind of finding their way around, they'll inevitably ask, okay, well, what's next? And might sound funny, but we'll tell them, go make some mistakes, go out there and make some mistakes and try and break what we're doing. And they're like, what? You want me to go and mess stuff up? I'm like, well, no, just go out there and try and break it. See if the system works for you, and see if it doesn't. And if it doesn't work, tell us why it isn't working, and we'll see if we can kind of make some tweaks along the way. But it's always kind of a funny reaction because people are not sure how to react to someone saying, go out there and try and screw it up. Right. So they know that if they make a mistake, they're not going to get hammered down on. It's more to support them and kind of, test our process and make sure that we're kind of on the right track. Right. And it's the same drill. Go out and make some mistakes and just don't make the same mistake 5 or 6 times. Right.
So how do you think, Lory, about, because I think one obstacle, it's interesting. I had an opportunity to kind of share some thoughts at an event yesterday. And one of the things that I talked about is a lot of times for companies, when you compare them like pound for pound with their competitor, they got the same gear, they're largely doing the same service. In many ways, they're working for the same carriers sometimes, so why does one outperform the next? And one of the things that I've observed is sometimes it's just what the owners and what the management team believes, and almost like kind of what are some of their, call it their biases, right? And if one person believes that I got nothing to learn from my team, or, my team are a bunch of numbskulls, whereas other person says, my team has stuff to learn, but I actually think I have something to learn from them. Right. Or I think that, those different mindsets I find can be, they the trickle down of those beliefs I find really quite like there's some serious diversity on the bottom end of those philosophies. So, well, tell us like about you talk about your management style, and so I think a lot of people wouldn't even if you asked them what their management style is, they probably even never even considered that. So let's come back to that. But what's going on at the leadership and maybe the ownership level that there is a belief that one, staff have a lot to contribute, and two, um, you guys are confident enough in your systems that you can say something as bold as put it to the test. Like what's underneath that? Even just from a, I know it may sound a little soft and squishy, but like there's obviously something going on at the leadership ownership level that is fueling that type of culture.
For me personally, like I talked about that lens of the industry coming into this position. I had the luxury of kind of having some different roles in my career, and it's allowed me to appreciate kind of what the end, or in a lot of cases, the insurance company or the adjuster is looking for. And to sum it up in one word, empowerment is really important. We don't think we can have a really high powering team if there's micromanagement and people aren't empowered to make decisions. Because if they're not empowered to make decisions on a day-to-day basis, it clogs up the system. That's kind of what we found. There's certain decisions you want your staff to make, and there's certain things that they can't. If that's well defined at the beginning, the empowerment really does go a long way. The other thing we really push, we do a quarterly newsletter, and all the different department heads, operational leaders, they have a chance to kind of talk about the wins and successes and challenges of the last quarter. I do a little summary, kind of a bird's eye view summary of the group of companies, and I typically try and end each one with kind of a common theme in terms of we're not a restoration company, we're actually a communications company, we're a customer service company. That's kind of what we're trying to ingrain in our people. And to your original question about what makes you different, everyone has the same equipment, everyone has the same technologies and tools, that sort of thing. It's really the people that make you different, and people with the mindset of being that proactive communicator and the company that can anticipate what your customer is looking for. That's kind of what we're trying to embed in kind of our culture. And that's why I tend to end those newsletters in that fashion to say, hey, remember, we do a lot of good things out there, but never forget we're a communications and customer service company at the core. That's kind of what our core value is to move forward.
Let me double click on that for a second. So, because I think that we need to dig into that a little bit. So you said we're not a restoration company, we're a communication company and a customer service company. So I think I'm tracking with you. But for someone that maybe heard that and just took a swig of their coffee as they're listening to this and they're driving down the road and they say, hold on a second, what did he just say? Hold on, they're not a restoration company, they're a communication and customer service company. And you're saying that in the context of having a pretty good pulse on what matters to insurance carriers. So could you add a little more color to that, Lory? I think that's pretty significant.
I wish it was a longer answer, but I think the reality of it is that service companies like ourselves, they're going to continue to get more work if you make the life easy to the person that's calling you. And that means good communication. If there's a multi-unit property that you're working on, it means a lot of stakeholders involved. It means that communication has to be top notch. If I kind of found over my career, if you are proactive in terms of how you communicate with people, no matter who the stakeholder is, the result ends up being positive more often than negative. So that's kind of the approach. The reason we've kind of looked at it that way is communication can make or break your next claim. And if communication's bad on one claim, you might not get a call again for a long time or ever from that person.
And is that how it's always been at the company? Is that different than it's been? Like, was that part of the shift you were describing before?
We've been around since, in our case, 1981. So I believe that it's always been there. I think it just had to be, the focus had to be sharpened up a little bit, and kind of, we've tried to tackle it just from some different angles in terms of the teams we've built and kind of how we kind of manage a job day to day. It's not it's not cut and dry every single claim as you can appreciate restoration. So we try and tailor things based on who the client, who the situation is. So it's really just
And,
more or less we kind of resharpened our focus in that area.
and and for someone who's like, so someone who is hearing your advice here, and they'd say, well, that is not how I would describe my company. I mean, oftentimes when I hear, especially because I think you know this, like we survey tons of technicians and staff and whatnot. And when you ask staff, like one of my favorite questions to ask staff anonymously is, why did good people in your company quit? Right? Not the guy that we kind of hired him in a storm and a storm season, and we needed a pair of hands, and not that individual, but like people that when you find out that she's packing it in, everyone on the team is like, no, are you serious? Like, we're screwed. And when you ask why they quit, the same reasons come up. One is that they'll say, um, it's just it's just chaos. Like there's just the way we do things changes based on who you talk to. It's so difficult to get answers. You just feel like you're walking through glue, right? And so when you're describing this enabled, this empowered worker, that's very different than what we hear. The other thing that we hear is that they'll say that because there's a lack of clarity, there's just a lack of alignment across the team. There's constant conflict because we're always stepping on each other's toes, and and it sounds like you've done a lot to combat that. Um, what's your take on that? And how would you advise a company that they're not experiencing that, like like they're just trying to keep their head above water, and what you're describing is very foreign to them? What would be your advice to someone like that who says, "I need to do a big reset, Lori"?
Yeah, communication again. It's keep saying it, but communication is key. Just that open line. Just getting to know your people, making sure it's open door policy. It sounds easier said than done because everyone gets involved with different, Zoom calls or different conference calls or that sort of thing. But generally, if my door's open, come on in, kind of thing. And that's kind of the number one thing for each manager as well with their team is that, hey, if you have something or a concern that you'd like to talk about, come in anytime, chat, talk. We've found for us the usual reason people leave is because depending on the position they're in, if there isn't an immediate opportunity to kind of grow from within, we like to, our preference is to promote from within. If there's opportunities, we like to post it internally first and see who's interested in what, and it kind of gives us a chance to develop that person first instead of going outside. That's typically if there's not an opportunity within that person's own personal timeline. That's kind of the most usual reason they're leaving. And sometimes it's money, but most of the time it's usually opportunity. But I can see, I've met a lot of people along the way where, yeah, if there isn't transparency and there isn't that open line of communication, it does create a lot of frustration. And if there isn't clear direction on a job, and maybe it could be as simple as something was missing on a work order for the crew to roll out that date, and they're not seeing it, so they don't. And that's and project manager thought they did it, and vice versa. So if there isn't good communication on that job, that can create a bit of conflict. So the solution for us has been to just create some different expectations around getting the work orders out properly and just making sure that it's very crystal clear. And we encourage our project managers to join in on the safety tailgate meetings monthly, and just making sure that they kind of have that presence and interaction with our frontline field team. And that kind of, for us at least, it's lent itself to a very open environment where people aren't afraid to talk to each other. A lead tech isn't afraid to talk to a senior project manager or a commercial project manager, or an assistant technician is not afraid to come and talk to the operations manager. It's created that very open environment where it's not a reason for people to want to leave anymore.
And if you were to, I know this is maybe a bit of a difficult question to quantify, but when you think about all of the work that you put into, management meetings and alignment and getting together every quarter to see where we're at, and this really thorough newsletter, these meetings where a person can, or project managers jumping in to make sure we're all on the same page. I mean, that what you're describing, another way of describing what you're describing is money. Like this, so there's money being spent on getting people on the same page. Um, how do you think about like just the return on that investment that you're making? Like, how do you justify that spend in your mind?
Well, year-over-year growth, that's probably the simplest and easiest. But when you look at financials, if you're growing and things are moving in the right direction from that standpoint, that's an early indicator. But um, I another one for us is to tell it's working is that when we hold social events or staff appreciation things like barbecues or um, that sort of nature type ideas is who's in the room, who's coming, who's attending. And if we're getting a good mix of people from different departments, it kind of tells me that, yeah, yeah, we're on the same page. All that effort's kind of been worth it compared to when I look back five years ago. You might have a couple of people showing up and maybe certain groups not wanting to talk to other groups. So it kind of showed me that that's a really good indicator, just a people indicator that people want to be around each other. And that's important to me.
So what I'm hearing you say is you're making all these changes. Not even changes, really. What you're doing is you're rolling with a system that you have in place. You're maintaining these systems, and then a good indicator of whether or not people are engaged is like what I'm hearing you say is we have team social events. It's not mandatory attendance. If you don't show up, if you don't show up to the barbecue, don't show up on Monday. Like you're encouraging them to come. And the question ultimately is who comes. And if what I'm hearing is if there's a good mix of departments, then what we're seeing buy-in to the way we do things company wide. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, bang on.
Yeah. I think that is, it's interesting because you're saying like you're at a quantitative, quantitative side, like, yeah, year over year, like is the business growing? Like if it's working, it's working. But also you're saying there's a little more of that qualitative side is, get a bit of a vibe in the room. So let me ask you this, Lory, on the culture stuff. Since and I know this is maybe hard to maybe a little bit harder to speak dollars and cents about, but there was a state of the business. You described it years ago. I think I'm getting the 2019 vibe. There's a state when you joined the team where things were different, and then there's a state now. What would you say, like, if you were just to describe the mood, the vibe, on the team today versus then, now that you made all these changes, like, how would you describe even just the mood and the atmosphere on the other side of all these operational infrastructure changes?
I'd say back then it felt, no, with no disrespect to anyone in the past, but it felt, I guess, stale might be the right word. Like it was like people were kind of going through the motions, and maybe there wasn't as much drive or focus in pursuing different things or different accounts, and then they broke it, don't fix it kind of thing. Compared to now, I'd hazard a guess that if you asked a lot of our folks here, it's a very energized atmosphere. It's very collaborative, and that's everything we've kind of pushed for, is to kind of when if a big job comes in, it's kind of everyone's running around with it. It's just an energy. Happened yesterday. We had a big job called in, and it was literally just Grand Central. It was like just everyone wanted to help out and kind of, hey, and people calling each other, what do you need? Can I get there? Do you want me to order something? Do you want me to, like, it's just a beehive of energy. And then you come in the next morning and just, you pick up right where you left off. And there's a meeting right away this morning at 6:30 to make sure that we're geared and ready to go and going to tackle the project with fervor. Right. And so I'd say the best word would be just an energetic kind of vibe, because people have the confidence. We talked about empowerment before. That led to confidence that they don't have to come and ask permission to buy a pencil or that sort of thing, right? So we found the empowering and created confidence, and that created energy.
And what are some things that you're doing, or how are you thinking about what you're doing? I'm wondering, like, how you're playing defense. You know what I'm saying? Like, how are you protecting what you've built? Like, I wonder if you give us any examples of, like, this is, if you saw Lory doing this, he's weeding. You know what I'm saying? Like he's weeding or he's shoring up the fence. And then I want to come back, and I'd love to hear about, like, you're a systems thinker. Like I can see you're a dot connector. And so even a great system, a person like you, I'm gonna bet that you see lots of opportunity for improvement. And so I wonder if we could start. I'm just curious on just the operational on this elegant machine that is the business that you've been working and refining. If we were to spot you protecting, weeding, fencing off to ensure that it doesn't wash away, what does that look like? What are some tangible examples of how you guard what you built from an operational standpoint?
A lot of brainstorming with my key management group. We'll have I'd say probably every couple of weeks we'll sit around. We'll sit around in one of our offices and we'll talk about what's happening in the industry, what's happening with our competitors, and with some of the things we've done that have really helped us is kind of making sure we're really connected to our community. Um, I kind of feel like sometimes that creates a bit of a target, and I like having the target on our back. It kind of keeps us sharp. And when we brainstorm, we're always thinking about ways, how do we keep the blade sharp? What do we have to do differently? I can tell you with 110% confidence that our entire team doesn't mind change at all. They don't. In fact, we constantly talk about why do we do this with that position instead of what they're doing right now? How do we allocate people to make it even more efficient? So that's what'll happen when we sit down, and it's usually over a coffee or a beer or something like that. And we'll just talk about how do we keep the blade sharp. And we'll talk about, it might be a process, it might be a program we're using, or it might be people, in terms of which people are on the teams for what reason. Is it working? Is it not working? And if it's not working, why isn't it working? And one of the things we will do is one example is we had a position called mobile operations supervisor in one of our businesses, and their role was to make sure the quality of things like pack out and pack back and damage is not occurring on a property were taking place, kind of a quality control kind of position. And we're only 3 or 4 months into it. So one of the things we thought would be helpful is that if we did a bit of a 360 survey for our frontline teams that are responding or reporting to this new position. So we thought it was a good idea to kind of put a survey up to those folks to say, is this working? Are you getting the information you need? Are you getting the training you need? What are your thoughts on it, so that we can validate that the benefit outweighs that cost? So that's some of the stuff we'll do in the background to kind of just make sure that the change was the right change. And if it wasn't the right change, then we're reevaluating, kind of switch gears. So especially our leader of our commercial and complex division, Ryan, he really does help push. He helps push me, honestly, to challenge the status quo, and kind of keeps my blade sharp, if that makes sense.
Makes sense. It does make sense. The old Stephen Covey would say, you got to sharpen the saw, right? Even when you're just like ripping through, loads of lumber, right? You're just moving. You still got to sharpen the saw, and and I'm sure that it probably comes at times with your team where, have you heard someone on your team say, Lory, like, it's working. Like, why do we need to refine it? Why do we need to sharpen? Like, it's working. Do you ever run into that?
Sometimes, but my answer is
Mhm.
like what you said. You got to keep the blade sharp. Can't I keep cutting through things without with a dull blade.
Yeah.
So a lot
What
of things we do in the background, just that weed pulling is really gives us a chance, especially if, when things are a little bit slower, gives us a chance to look at numbers and look at our financials and just make sure that there isn't any areas that are kind of getting out of whack. And if they are, then we do a bit of a deep dive to see what might be driving it, and just try to create some mini action plans, if you will, around it. If we see some trending not where we want to be, we'll kind of, receivables is everyone's favorite topic in restoration. So that's kind of an area where we kind of try and create some different ideas and different thoughts on how to do it better.
Yeah. And I see that. Yeah. I've had the pleasure of being in your facility, and I've had the pleasure of meeting some of your teams. Heck, I've had the pleasure of going to one of your fundraisers, and, yeah, I see what you're describing, and I see, the light in your team members' eyes, and you have a really dialed in team. So for someone, I want to take I want to take as we start to kind of, land the ship here, I want to ask you some specific questions because I think at this point, it's pretty clear to anyone who's just receiving this information that you guys have gone through a state change, that there's been some catalytic leadership decisions made that have just breathed new life into things. And so, um, someone who's listening to this and say, hey, Lory, I want to start to experience, you know, I know what that stale feeling is like, and some people, if they're bold enough, they'd be like, I'm there now. Like that's what's going on. Like I see how people are sitting in the parking lot, taking a moment before they come into the office because I know what they're thinking. They're thinking it's going to be another grind today, right? And I'm going to have to put up with so and so. And I see their vehicle in the parking lot. And so there's people who I think are hearing that, they recognize they need to make some changes. So what would be the first steps? Like if someone wanted to bring more order, more rigor to their operations in this business, where would you advise them to start?
What's really helped us over the years is that it's one thing to have that relationship with your team day to day. But sometimes the message can get stale, and it's not that they're tuning out the voice, but sometimes they need a different voice to extract the information that you need to help make the change. So in our case, we worked with a business coach for over a decade that has really proved to be invaluable for us. He's helped me a ton in my career in terms of kind of rounding out on the restoration side, and he participates in our strategic meetings and the planning as we lead up to it. He helps participate in the facilitating of it. But there'll be times where if I think something's getting stale, I'll actually ask him to, I'll give him some questions that I want to answer. And he'll have some private interviews and one-on-ones with different people in different departments just to pull out some information. And that helps us kind of take the next step and kind of create some confidence in kind of some of the decisions you have to make. Some of them will be hard decisions for sure. But for someone feeling stale, I'd say the best advice is to kind of think of different ways to get the information out than you've been trying over the last, whatever it's been, months, years, decades, and not be afraid to take a bold step and try something different. Some of it might cost money. A lot of it doesn't. But a lot of it, I think really kind of comes down to just making sure you have those open lines with your people and getting the information that you think is going to help affect change. And sometimes some of the changes are easier, and it's just a matter of just taking that step off the cliff and just doing it. The worst thing that's going to happen, I mean, depending on the decision, of course, the worst thing is peel back the decision. The change doesn't work, and you try something different. You try something different until one of the changes you make is the right decision for your operation, depending on what your size is, right?
And no doubt, what I'm hearing underneath that, like you're describing this like tenacity, to just keep coming at it. And I think it's fair to say, like what I'm getting underneath this is what's driving that is there is clearly a desire to win. I picked up on that. You're talking about your competitors and like I'm getting the vibe that your team, they like to win, they enjoy winning, and there's the pursuit of the win. So what's powering all these changes is like what I'm getting the vibe is we want to be great, we want to be the best. Is that a fair? Am I? I don't think I'm misreading the situation there.
No, and maybe that is. I mean, I know that's played on a team sport or sports in general. It's kind of it's a hard switch to flip off. Losing isn't fun. Losing gives you a bad feeling, and winning, you want to keep winning, right? And I think for us internally, we've created that kind of that healthy competition, especially with the DKI Canada network, in terms of kind of what is our performance like. We get regular displays of information for our entire network across DKI Canada in terms of what are our KPIs and how do we compare against our region, our province, how do we compare against all the other members in Canada. And we have people in our office that have taken ownership of it to such a level that they live and breathe it every day. It's all about being on the top of that group within our network at least, and they take it's clear they take pride in it, and just the communications we see every day talking about it and how we can get better, even though we already have a good score. They're talking about how do we get better, even though we're above average. How do we keep getting better?
Yeah, well said. So how do you ensure that when you bring someone new on the team, like how are you ensuring that they are properly onboarded and kind of integrated into this system that you built? What does that look like for you?
For us, I'd like to say a whole bunch of the onboarding is documented, but it's not. It's more, we make sure when someone comes in, we have a schedule of who they're going to meet, when, and why. And we have touch points kind of after each of those meetings to kind of make sure that that it's sunk in, that they got the information they need. We do a lot of, depending on the position, obviously, a lot of it is pairing up with people to kind of get out in the field or spend time with different people in the office to kind of understand the whole picture. Then we make sure just the simple things, just the interpersonal part, just making sure that they're comfortable with everyone in the building and in the environment, and making sure that they meet who's who in the Zoom, and they're really comfortable. The first week is really about just making sure they're really comfortable. They're getting a good vibe, and maybe take them for lunch or something with a few people just to kind of welcome them into the team. But really the operational success with our onboarding is really about the people that have been here for a while and their willingness to kind of put them under their wing and kind of teach them the things they need to know, and making sure they understand what support levels, levers exist in the business in terms of, we have a few different ways we can do things when running a project. Some of it can be choose your own adventure, but they're all different processes that we have embedded into our business. They just need to understand which lever to pull and when. And it's their choice on kind of how they want to shape their kind of file management system.
Yeah, well said. Okay, Lory, I've got 4 closing questions for you. So we'll call this the rapid fire round. You've made a very strong case that what's on the other side of all this, you used the term pain earlier. You said it was painful. So what's on the other side of all this pain is, it's life. Like, you've built this very living, breathing company that's creating this fulfilling, high performance environment that people clearly love being part of. So if someone who wants to implement similar systems into their operations, like they want to start to move towards this greater rigor in operations, that actually is funny. The funny thing about operational rigor is that when you do it right, it's not restrictive, it's empowering. It's funny. It's like this counterintuitive thing. What advice would you be like? What are some things that someone should, okay, stop doing this, start doing this? What would be your snap response to that? Stop doing this, start doing this.
Stop procrastinating, start deliberately planning.
And where should they invest? Like, if you were to say, look, put cash in this, put your money where your mouth is in this area.
People and technology. People first. Good people want to be around good people, and good people are worth investing in.
And then last question is, all of this boils down. Like, I think you and I both believe, like, this is a people business, right? And I know actually one thing, Lory, that's because I know it's to you, it's like, it's simple. Actually, to me, it's very profound. You're like, oh, I'm not a restoration company. I'm a customer service and a communication company. And it doesn't surprise me that you guys have a conglomerate of companies, because as soon as you say, these are the 2 things we're good at, I mean, heck, you guys could dominate any vertical, right? So that's pretty exciting. But if you could teach leaders one thing about attracting and retaining talent in this industry, in property restoration, what would it be?
It's about the right people. Take your time in making sure you're bringing on the right person to fit the culture that you built or are building. That's the most important thing. We've learned over the years that someone you might not have the most experience or the right skills, but if the personality and attitude is there, and there's alignment in terms of what your vision is, that's the person you want to invest in, because they're probably going to be around a while. That you'll probably develop or have a high level of trust in that person to be empowered, and you want people to own what they're doing. And sounds kind of funny, but if everyone around you owns what they're doing, it makes your life a heck of a lot easier.
Well said. And I think that is what a lot of people want, is they want to have a life, as a manager, as a leader, as an owner, where, as the old adage is, they want to feel like they're working on a business, not just running in the business all day. And it sounds like you've had some success getting there. Lory, hey, there's so much we could dig into, but you're a busy guy and you run an impressive business. So thanks for taking the time to unpack all this, and thanks for being so generous with your playbook about how you do this. And I know that this is a process in motion for you guys, but it's working. And I have the unique opportunity to actually be in the city that you operate in. And every time I see your trucks zipping by, which I see often, I know that they're going, and wherever they're going, they're going to do a good job. So thanks for giving us some of your wisdom today.
No, appreciate the opportunity, and always a pleasure chatting with you, and feel free to stop by anytime.
Well, that's all for this month on the Restoration Playbook Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to Know How wherever you're listening so you don't miss out on all the road-tested advice from top operators in your industry. You can read more about Lory and his advice on R&R. Just head to rnrmagonline.com or find the link in our show notes. We'll talk to you next month.
Know How is an intuitive, mobile-first application designed to rapidly onboard new hires, upskill staff, and provide on-demand expert guidance for whatever task is next. Home to your company's proven methods, Know How ensures everyone has the skills they need to get the job done right. With time-saving features that make it a breeze for management to build, maintain, and translate standard operating procedures. It's time to ditch your outdated operation binders and dated, difficult-to-search systems. With Know How in their pocket, your staff have the how-to they need wherever the day takes them.